Hello everybody. So I would like to make a video today talking about how to learn to redirect your attention towards love and happiness, even when you're going through or into different experiential nexes, or experiential kind of vortices that may bring up other feelings. This is actually, it's really a conversion technique, I guess, of learning how to recognize the vibrational frequency of specific energies, and through understanding those energies, to learn how to move and convert those energies into different forms of energy. And like negative feelings and emotions and experiences like that, like of lower emotions, are basically all opportunities for a energy conversion that's being presented to you. And there's actually like ways of looking at, I guess, these cycles of beingness from a space that's a little bit more detached, I guess, than what is normal for human beings to look at this stuff from. And what happens is that you see that the so-called negative emotions or lower emotions are just pointers to a new representation or new perspective on the same energy. And when you start to experience the new perspective of the same energy, then that same energy becomes something different. And it's not actually different, it's just different in your eyes, meaning you just see the energy differently. So then your mind, or your mind, body, spirit complex, like, interprets the energy differently than it used to. So initially what I was trying to talk about in this video in particular is converting energy, and also learning how to direct your stream of focus, or your consciousness stream, to the feeling of love, and the feeling of happiness, and the feeling of acceptance. And basically learn how to constantly redirect your attention towards something that brings you happiness, love, or joy. And this is difficult for a lot of people, because what happens is that they get caught up in cycles of doing things over and over again, meaning like they get used to responding to some sort of catalyst or situation with a conditioned response system, which could be anything from, feeling upset or angry or sad, or like feeling victimized, feeling all these different kinds of emotions are all conditioned response patterns to specific circumstances that come up in your life. And then when you then respond to those conditioned response patterns in the same way that you have been for however long you've been alive, then the same kinds of experiences present themselves over and over again in the form of emotional kind of states of consciousness. And then after choosing that emotional state of consciousness and that specific reaction over and over and over again, you then identify with that specific emotional state, and you think that that is your emotional state, and then that then becomes your vibrational frequency for this lifetime. What we're trying to do, though, is to learn how to disconnect our kind of our stream of consciousness from the conditioned response patterns that I guess the ego has gotten used to using, and to learn how to actually redirect the attention to something else that brings a much more profound state of consciousness, or a state of happiness or joy, even ecstasy, or enlightenment, really. I mean, it's basically just, enlightenment really is the loss of the need to cling to this world, and to cling to physical pleasures and comforts as being something that's going to satisfy you spiritually. I mean, it's important to keep the body, basically like Sorry, I'm trying to come over here so we can get the background. But it's important to keep the body in a state where it feels comfortable and where you feel good, but also at the same time, okay, so basically, like, the conditioning or the actual, like, I guess the building up of the body is a natural side effect of the building of spiritual consciousness in the mind. And what I mean by that is that when you start to have some of these, like, I guess, revelations, or even just like understandings that there are new perspectives that you can achieve or that you can tap into, you start to gain a new respect for the body and the mind, because you realize, first of all, that your body is the vehicle that you use to travel through this world. So if you want to think about it in a materialistic way, you would want, and some people, some people are super, and this is just metaphors on the material plane or whatever, but some people are super rich and they still enjoy driving a beat up Honda Civic. Some people who are very rich, and what I mean by rich in this sense or context is with a spiritual richness, or a maybe like a metaphysical richness in their life where they're touched by the spirit. And then there's some people who are rich and they want to drive the nicest vehicles. Say, bringing it back to, I guess, the spiritual thing, like if you look at Osho or something like that, like he has 90 or had like 90 something Rolls Royces, and there's a reason behind this. And like the reason why I'm saying this and bringing this up is that it is important to bring yourself into material comfort if you want to do a lot of work on this material plane, and if you want to be comfortable in the midst of doing that work on the material plane. But it's really easy to get caught up in the actual kind of like game of the materialism and to not really understand why you're using all these different kinds of quote unquote comforts. So people think that they're going to gain their satisfaction from the comforts that they find in the external world, and that is the problem. Like, the problem is not actually just that people want comfort. The problem is that they think that they're going to get comfort from something that's not going to bring them comfort. Meaning, like, you may physically feel comfortable, but you're still going to, in your mind and in your body and your spirit, you're going to still feel like there's something missing or like there's something wrong all the time, because you haven't touched a deeper part of yourself, and because you haven't touched this kind of like inner knowledge and understanding, because you've been so focused on the external world. So this has been a big rant, but like I'll go deeper into kind of moving yourself into a space of happiness and love. It's all about learning to redirect your attention in the midst of being in the experience of like the negativity. So the interesting thing about the negative energy is that it can sometimes put people into what feels like a trance, I guess. And what that means is that like the thought systems and the specific kinds of like conditioned response patterns and like how the body will respond to specific stimuli and things like that, like it has to be witnessed by yourself while you're in the midst of the experience, in order for you to be able to disconnect and identify when you're in the midst of that experience. And then when you're in the midst of the experience, what'll happen is you'll get this urge to direct your attention to something else and see, and this is from a higher perspective, because like most of the time people get caught in these kinds of loops or cycles and then they just stick in the negative energy. But what I'm trying to show is how to actually observe being in the cycle, and then use the observation of the ridiculousness of the cycle to bust yourself out of the cycle. And what I mean by this is that there's a specific energy that you see when you start witnessing yourself, when you go into these like negative trances in a way. And what happens is that you'll see that you'll start to do specific things that are either self-sabotaging or things that are like you'll start thinking in a specific way that spirals out of control or moves into a space where it makes you start feeling really, really bad, or any of that kind of stuff. And you have to notice that and notice the consequences of those specific thought loops, and notice what those thought loops are in the midst of experiencing the thought loops, and not get caught up in the negativity of the actual thought and the negativity of what your mind's trying to tell you about what it is that you're experiencing. It's very important in order to be able to learn to redirect your attention to something that is going to bring you happiness. And then when you actually successfully are able to do this in the midst of the experience, meaning like you're observing yourself going through this negative experience, and then you finally decide, I don't want to experience this negativity anymore, and you redirect your attention to something else, and then you choose to do that other activity rather than the activity that's a conditioned response system, then you feel really, really good. You get this really, really nice feeling inside of your mind and your body, and it kind of like points you to keep doing that in that direction. But the thing is that since that's so new to your system, and since that's so new to your consciousness of like a new response system that you're trying to implement, it's going to be something that you have to consciously do for a little bit of time. So for me, it's taken 6 months of really like purely looking and observing all of the kinds of things that the ego does and the body does and all this kinds of stuff, and then just observing all these patterns play themselves out. And then it's gotten to the point where it's just, I see that 95% of these patterns of conditioned response systems that I've had throughout my life have been not helping me grow, or they've been negative in some sort of way, meaning like they've been bringing me some sort of a negative experience. And so I've just been dropping them off one by one based on their severity and like the like urgency of how urgent it is to drop off that specific thing. And really the last thing to go has been coffee, I guess, like caffeine. And that's really not that big of a thing anymore. I mean, like, it's like, yeah, it's not that big of an issue or anything like that. It's more of just like the last thing to go. And then point being though, like for me, I've already done most of the internal work when it comes down to like my state of consciousness. So I've learned how to shift myself into a positive state of consciousness most of the time. And now it's just literally the physical patterns and like the reactions and things like that have to be brought under control. And not even under control, it's just to be witnessed and to be purged out through the witnessing and through the observation of the cycling. And then to finally, in the midst of being in the cycle, just make the decision that you're ready to break out of the cycle. And then when you finally make that decision, you just see what it feels like for, starting with a short period of time of like distance away from that specific emotional thought pattern or any of that kind of stuff. And then you just keep kind of like extending that amount of time that you distance yourself away from it, and just keep observing how you feel. And you'll notice that there's bursts of times where when you distance yourself away from negative patterns and things, that you start feeling these like random bursts of ecstasy, or you feel these random bursts of joy shoot through you. And it's important not to associate that with the previous kinds of patterns that used to bring you joy or happiness, meaning like if you were to like have gotten used to like taking substances or any of that kind of stuff for a shot of happiness, and then all of a sudden you feel the same kind of shot of happiness shoot through you when you haven't taken a substance, and then all of a sudden it brings up a craving for the substance, then just recognize that and see that as well. And then what'll happen is that you'll start to realize that that substance wasn't actually the thing that was bringing you the feeling. What it was actually your decision in that moment to let go of the need to have something to make yourself feel better. And then all of a sudden you start to feel better. And then like what'll happen is like you got used to being able to do something, and then all of a sudden have a shift in your consciousness state. But now that the earth has been shifting, and that we're moving into a 4-dimensional state of consciousness, and like that we're moving into this new earth, and like past all these different kinds of blockages and things, we're starting to realize now that we create all of our reality, even the external substances that we take. And those external things that we take are actually only just showing us or unlocking different portions or aspects of our own consciousness inside of ourselves. And through that, what I mean by that is that literally all of these external things that we take in order to shift the way that we feel are only things that are evoking an internal state in us, which means that it's not actually the substance or the thing that we take from the outside. What it is actually is our own internal state of consciousness being represented through a particular veil of a thing. And it's like all these things that you take or enjoy, what it is really is invoking a specific energy inside of you. And if you get like addicted to an energy, or something like that, then all you have to do is just learn a new way of evoking the same energy, and then a healthier way of evoking the same energy. And that's very important, because like in order to be able to let go of even like addictions and things like that, which had been a huge issue in my life, and all these different kinds of like problems with like substances and like opiates and like amphetamines and like all these different kinds of like weed and like all this stuff, you know, like all these things had been affecting my life so powerfully, and I had never really recognized or realized that they were actually only showing me specific parts or portions of my own consciousness. I also, through distancing myself away from those experiential nexus and those drugs and stuff like that, started to see what happened, like how people actually got caught up in those cycles. Like, you know, I was in a friend group at one point in my life where almost everybody in the friend group was doing like hardcore drugs and things like that, and I was able to witness from that perspective as well, meaning like that root chakra, like very, very low sacral chakra kind of experience, and just to see like how deep of a low that humans could really go to. I felt disconnected really from that the whole time, almost. Like even like when I was in the midst of it, experiencing the friend group and all that kind of stuff, I still didn't feel as though I was like part of it. It more felt like I was witnessing it, even though I was like doing all the stuff with all the people and all that kind of stuff. So it's like I knew the whole time that wasn't really what I was meant to be doing, and that my soul had a much deeper purpose, but I was almost like distracting myself. But I wasn't distracting myself, because now I see that experience was actually something